All right, what's going on, Giants fans? Doing another free agency preview. 5, what I think will be the most likely targets for the New York Giants at the outside linebacker spot slash edge. Um, this one is kind of hard to gauge because this could be their big money get, and they could also try and fill it in and stay with Lorenzo Carter and O'Shane Ximines and bring in a couple, cheap guys or, give Carter Coughlin that fourth outside linebacker role. So there's a lot of fluctuation of what the Giants want to do here, and there's been some rumors. So we'll go through it. I got 5 guys that I think would make sense for the Giants or are just targets by the Giants. And we're going to start with a guy who was just cut by the Miami Dolphins. Kyle Van Noy, 6'3", 250, turns 30 in a couple of weeks. Now, he was cut by the Miami Dolphins. Obviously, he got that big contract this past offseason. They cut him flat out, which was kind of a surprising move because his 2020 was good. In 2020, he had 69 tackles, 10 for a loss, which was a career high, 6 sacks, which was, half off of his career high, and then 18 pressures. And that was all while being much more of a coverage linebacker than he was a pass rush. He had 10 more coverage snaps than he did pass rush snaps. Now, he's always been a little bit of both, but he had always been more of a pass rusher than a coverage guy, and that's the way Miami used him. And then in 2019 with the Patriots, when he got his contract, 56 tackles, 7 for a loss, 6.5 sacks, and then 24 pressures. And then again, he was used, he pass rushed way more than he was in coverage with New England. And also, I looked at this the past the past 7 playoff games, he has 5 sacks, so he's shown up in the big games. But this is just a perfect fit because of the Joe Judge connection. There's a Joe Judge connection there with the Patriots, and then 2. He is versatile, and that's what I'm looking for out of this list is versatile guys. That's what the Giants value. You saw them not play Marcus Golden, even though he was their best pass rusher out on the edge. They didn't want to play him, and then obviously he was traded at the deadline. So he's that versatile tight linebacker that Patrick Graham likes to use. There's a connection there. So this is the one that makes the most sense to me. If you could get him in that $5 to $8 million range, I'd be cool with it. Obviously, you're not going to pay him what he was getting before, and it'll probably be a shorter term deal because he is 30 years old now. But Kyle Van Noy, man, I watched film on him last year. I think he's a solid player who does a lot of little things that people don't notice. And Kyle Van Noy would be a thrilling get for me. And he was on Pat McAfee's show last offseason and dropped it like, oh, I love Joe Judge and go Giants. So it just seems like a natural fit. Next on the list is a guy who was a natural fit for the New York Giants. Kyler Fat Growl, 6'5", 245. 29 years old. Last year he played on a 1-year, $2.6 million deal. He was very important for the Giants. He was very important. He wasn't the main guy to start this season. They had Lorenzo Carter, and they were giving O'Shane Ximines those snaps, and he gave some to Golden, even though he wasn't playing a ton. But then O'Shane goes down, and then he jumps into a role. Lorenzo goes down, and then even then he was playing more than Marcus Golden, and then Marcus Golden's gone, and he was like, "You're our only guy," and then he did end up missing some time. But he had 34 tackles, 4 sacks, 7 for a loss, and then the 1 interception against Dallas. He had that connection with Patrick Graham from his time in Green Bay. Obviously knew Blake Martinez too. In 2018 he had 10.5 sacks for the Packers. So this is a guy that is in the system. He didn't have some crazy year where he's going to go out and get this huge contract. So you might even be able to get him at less than the number the Giants got in 2020. That 2.6 mil. You might be able to get him at a little less. He's more of a pass rusher than a coverage guy. But again, like most of these guys, 3 out of the 5, they're versatile, and that's what Fat Growl brings. Where it allows Patrick Graham to, Patrick Graham, he values your ability to drop back in coverage and disguise looks more than he does just pure pass rush ability, and we saw that with Marcus Golden. And like I said, maybe you get him for cheap. And he is noticeably better than Carter Coughlin, Cam Brown, all those guys. But that's also to be expected. Next on the list, the big name, Bud Dupree. Now Jordan Renan has been saying that the Giants may go after Bud Dupree and might be interested in him. 6'4", 269, 28 years old, so he's still kind of young. Played on the franchise tag this past year, and everyone knows he tore his ACL. He tore his ACL. That's the big question mark around Bud Dupree. But guys come back from the torn ACLs now. Maybe it takes a little time, but there's a lot of guys and a lot of evidence that says, you come back from your torn ACL and you're all right, as long as you do all the training and all the right stuff. And His 2019 season was awesome. In his 2019, he had 11.5 sacks, 16 tackles for a loss, 17 QB hits. He was on pace for like basically that or better for that in 2020. In the 11 games, he had 8 sacks, 8 tackles for a loss, 15 QB hits, which is only 2 less than he played in the a 16 game season in 2019. So he's on that better pace. Renan hinted at it, and you may get him for cheap. We saw the way the pass rushers last year, which are Jadeveon Clowney, some guys that we liked in the mid tier that got really low contracts, so the pass rush market, the injury, he might be a guy you not get for cheap, but you don't get him at that big number that some would expect for who's the top pass rusher on the market in Bud Dupree. So Bud Dupree, he would be a beast, and we saw him play well against the Giants, and I really do think he would. Out of all these guys, I like all these guys we're talking on the list. This is the guy that puts the defense on another level. It does, because the Giants have missed that pass rush ability where it's like sometimes like your coverage can be fine, but you got to have someone who gets there, who's going to get there when you rush 4 or you don't have a disguised look, and then that stuff translates in the playoffs too. So Bud Dupree could be that guy for the Giants. We really have no idea what their big splash is going to be, if any. So your thoughts of wide receiver, pass rusher, we don't know, maybe even corner, but Bud Dupree definitely would be an exciting move for the Giants. Next on the list, not very exciting, but a very underrated player, Tyus Bowser, 6'3", 242 pounds from the Ravens, 25 years old, very young, very, very young. And he's the definition of versatile. He played about 65% pass rush snaps for the Ravens this past year, and then 35% in coverage. In 2020, he had 34 tackles, 2 sacks, 3 interceptions, 4 tackles for a loss, and 14 QB hits. In 2019, he had 5 sacks. So he has somewhat of ability to get to the QB, even though he's not going to be a guy that's going to get there a ton. He didn't play a ton. He played 51% of the snaps this past season, 40% in 2019. Was a second-round pick from them. But also, he played in a blitz-heavy scheme, which, as crazy as it sounds, the guys on the edge sometimes sacrifice their numbers a little bit because those guys are a priority, and then you're giving up pressure up the middle. Not to say Bowser was never lined up in the middle because he is a versatile type player, but he's good in coverage. I mean, you watch him break on the ball and cover, a running back in man coverage. He's really solid. So this might end up being on like my guys to get because you might get him for dirt cheap. He only played 50% of the snaps. His numbers aren't crazy. And he's got a super high motor. I mean, we know the Giants love those type of players. I mean, he is go, go, go at 100 miles per hour the entire game. So perfect for disguising looks for Patrick Graham. Can do a little bit of everything. And he's an athlete. He's an athlete, man. He ran a 4.65 40, a 37.5-inch vertical jump. Like, he might be just like the best, athlete besides Bud Dupree, because he can move around. Now, last on the list, this one's a Justin Pennick special. Let me rip the sheet. This is the Justin Pennick special. Justin wanted this guy last year. Jordan Jenkins from the Jets. 6'3", 260, 26 years old, so he's young. Last year signed a $1.5 million deal, which was way less than we thought he was going to. And it was on a 1-year deal, which it was a very surprising move that the Jets pulled that off. This past year in 12 games, he had 32 tackles, 2 sacks, 3 tackles for a loss. The season before, he had 8 sacks, 9 tackles for a loss. And the season before that, he had 7 sacks. So this year was a little bit of a down year. So he signed a $1.5 million deal, and he had a down year. So he could be super affordable. The difference between most of these guys, though, is he's a pass rush guy. He's not versatile. He's not going to be dropping back in coverage a ton. When he does, it's not going to look great. But he does have pass rush ability if they're looking to bring somebody in for the cheap on that. And Kevin Sherrer was his coach at Georgia. So, the Giants linebacker coach and Kevin Sherrer coached him while he was at Georgia. So there is a connection there. Robert Saleh's coming in. He's putting his 4-3 defense in, so maybe Jenkins doesn't fit quite into that, even though I can see him putting his hand in the dirt. So Jordan Jenkins, guy has some nice pass rush ability. He can bench press guys. He has some good finesse moves. So Jordan Jenkins. So that's it. Last one is coming on Monday. We're going to talk about the offensive line, which is a huge need. So make sure you subscribe, like, bam, bam, bam. See you guys on the next one. Until then, let's go Big Blue.